And then I loved finding people who were authentic, both investors and entrepreneurs who were authentic about their craft, authentic about what they wanted. And that was exciting to me, right? It was exciting because I felt like I had an opportunity to build a different Miami, a new Miami.
Raul Moas, thank you for joining us, brother.
Excited to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Dude. No, it's a pleasure, man. Want to get into all this good stuff. You and I have been working together on an initiative called the Local Leaders Collective that I'm super, super stoked on and super passionate about. So I want to talk about that. You're currently the Miami program director at the Knight Foundation. I want to talk about, how that whole thing came into being. But first, I want to start with you and your background so people have some context on you.
Yeah, so I'm Miami native.
Yep.
Born and raised here.
Yep.
Grandparents emigrated from Cuba when my parents were young. My parents came also. But we've been in Miami for effectively 40 years plus. And Miami was where our family found refuge and where they remade their lives. They rebuilt their lives, which is a really common story for so many people, not just Cuban Americans, but so many kind of diasporas from the Americas that have found refuge in the city. And in many ways, I think that's kind of just informed my worldview on everything, right? It's informed my worldview on gratitude, right? And how temporal things are, how temporal life is.
For sure, yeah.
How quickly you might have something and it might not be there. And so really appreciate and live in the moment. And it's also really informed me in terms of work ethic and dignity, right? My grandparents came and they did what they had to do to put food on the table, to make sure my dad, my mom had a future, right? Uncle was an attorney, great uncle was an attorney, came here, swept floors, right? Anything and everything to get the job done. And so that's just, I think, something that they've passed on to us, my siblings and I. It really is what in many ways, I now kind of reflecting on some of that. It's what I love about founders, what I love about entrepreneurs. It's that first it resonates with kind of the get things done thing that my grandparents and their generation did when they got here. They had to make it work. There was no alternative, right? You risked everything for a chance of life, freedom, success. And that's what the founders in Miami are doing, entrepreneurs do, right? They risk so much for a chance of success.
Yep.
And so I'm naturally kind of drawn to that spirit, very much so. But yeah, man, I'm a CPA by trade, actually. I got into, when I went to college, I thought I was going to go into architecture. I realized very quickly that I essentially showed up to architecture school with the equivalent of Crayola 8-pack, while everybody else was like AutoCADing and had a portfolio and like doing 3D models. And I'm like, what? And so I said, that's a passion. It might be a hobby. It's not a career. And I went to finance and accounting. It was a universal language that I could apply to any industry, any sector. I had no idea what I was going to do in life. I still really don't have any idea what I'm doing in life. But numbers
I think you're doing a pretty damn good job.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Numbers made sense to me, and I could apply them in any context. And so I'm a CPA by trade, but I very, very quickly realized that that's not kind of my charism. And working in accounting, international tax optimization, as we say, was not something that was particularly fulfilling or meaningful to me. And so I spent a couple of years at Ernst & Young. I then went off and I dove head first into my Cuban heritage at an organization called Roots of Hope. And so we were 20-something, 30-something Cuban Americans, year-old Cuban Americans that were exploring our roots. We were exploring our heritage. We also had this intense desire to reconnect with our counterparts on the island. What does a 20-something, 30-something-year-old Cuban who lives in Cuba aspire for? What do they want out of life? We grew up with one side of the story, if you will, or one kind of chapter of the story. And we really were curious about what the other chapters and the subsequent chapters were. For my grandparents, Cuba was swallowed up by the sea the second the plane took off from Havana. They've never looked back. They don't understand why I visit the island. They very much still have that pain of exile and trauma. And so I spent 4 years as the executive director of Roots of Hope, trying to foster not only just reconciliation, but just greater ties between young Cubans and young Cuban Americans, or Cubans in the diaspora, through tech and entrepreneurship. Two things that Cubans anywhere in the world love. They love gadgets, they love tech, and they love the hustle, right? And so there are non-political, non-partisan avenues through which Cubans can come together, regardless of political ideology or whether you're for this or against that. It was a space where young Cubans of all stripes could come together and build something.
I love that. Never even knew about that.
Yeah. And so I cut my teeth in leadership there, messed up every single way possible.
It's natural.
And learned a lot about myself, about my insecurities, about my deficits, my strengths as well.
Part of the process, man.
It was an incredible opportunity because it was a fairly interesting thing. I'm 20 something years old. I'm fundraising from some significant kind of players in the community. We're deploying interesting amounts of resources to tech and entrepreneurship efforts on the island. We're building sustainable enterprises under it that feed the nonprofits. We built a travel company. We built an accelerator that had kind of margins, and those margins fed the nonprofit work.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was awesome.
So in a lot of ways, it's like a precursor to what you're doing at night.
It really was,
naturally.
Man. It really was. I could not have planned for this, right?
Amazing.
You don't plan for these things.
Yeah.
But it was incredible for me, man, because I think I'm naturally rough around the edges to begin with, but it helped kind of polish some of that and just helped me become a lot more self-aware about who I am as a person, what my values are, what I aspire for in life, and also who I am as a leader.
Yep. Love that. Love that. So you did that for how long? The Roots of Hope. That was from when to when?
4 years, man.
4 years.
And I left right as the Obama administration was transitioning out before the 2016 election.
Gotcha.
I was there when Obama visited Cuba. It was a surreal trip. I personally think that in that visit, we advanced the interests of the United States and the Cuban people more than 60 years of existing policy had. I vividly remember, man, being in a car with with a friend, a young Cuban, listening to the speech that President Obama was making to the Cuban people, which the Cuban government had not shared the agenda for, meaning that the Cuban people did not know that the President of the United States was going to speak. They presumed it, but they didn't know when, and they didn't know how, and they didn't know where. And so when he comes on the air, on the radio station, which it was broadcast throughout the island, everybody just starts scrambling to find a radio station or a TV station because they didn't know when to expect it.
Right.
And so I'm sitting in this car in Havana. I have some friends that are in the National Theater listening to the speech live. I wasn't able to get a ticket for that event. And so I'm in this car and I'm listening to this. And the first thing I did was lowered all the windows because I want to make sure everybody in that neighborhood heard the speech, and we cranked up the volume. And the second thing we both did was cry. I cried because the president recognized my grandparents and my parents' pain and suffering. And he told the Cuban people on the island that Cuban Americans don't hate you, they don't despise you, they don't resent you, and they don't want to take anything away from you, which is 180 from what the Cuban people have been told by their government for 60 years.
It's an amazing moment.
And he cried because he heard the President of the United States tell him, you have a future. You can be the author of your own future. When Barack Obama, was born, my parents could not have been married in many states in the U.S. And here I stand today, president of that country. Change is possible. And for the first time, he witnessed what a leader setting a vision was all about.
Yep.
And so it was a beautiful moment, and it was a beautiful kind of cap to that journey. But I very much knew that my time with and around Cuba was coming to a close. I had different kind of aspirations that I wanted to explore, and that's how I ended up transitioning out.
Okay, and then this is, at that point, was 2016, you were saying, right? Was this right at the time where you joined AGP/Miami Angels?
That's exactly it.
Okay, great. For those listening that don't know AGP, Miami Angels, current group of angel investors here in Miami that organize, they meet, was it once a month? Is it once a month?
Yeah, it's about 120 investors. Yep. They get together once a month, and they your pitch nights.
Right. Used to be called Accelerated Growth Partners. Under your leadership, we rebranded it to Miami Angels, which makes a lot more sense.
More condensed.
So yeah, tell me about that transition. So now you're leaving Roots of Hope, and now you're joining into this investment community, meeting with a lot of venture capitalists, investors, and trying to help bring up the entrepreneur scene in Miami. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I really had no business in being an angel of seed stage investing. I had no background in it. I was coming to VC through the side window 100%.
How did that opportunity come your way?
A really good friend of mine, Tony Jimenez, knew Nico Berardi, who was the founding managing director of Miami Angels. Yep. He was involved at Roots of Hope, and he knew that I was looking for next. And he knew Nico was going to grad school, and he said, hey, you guys should sync up. And I think the interesting thing was I stepped into that role not having any background whatsoever in VC, but having background in a couple things. One is I think the worldview was ROI, right? So we're looking for amazing people,
right,
and we're looking both on the capital side and on the entrepreneur front,
right,
and we're looking to bring ROI to both parties.
how do we make impact, right?
Exactly, that's exactly it. So we came at this with a worldview of, hey, we got to matchmake, which is what we were doing with Roots of Hope. We were matchmaking phenomenal entrepreneurs through Startup Cuba with the mentors and the resources they needed. So worldview was really similar, but I had no actual experience in term sheets or any of this stuff. So a lot of reading, a lot of mentoring from folks and coaching. But it was an incredible experience. I fell in love, and for the first time, I think I felt like, all right, I have a pretty clear sense of an area, sector that I really am passionate about, right? I was passionate about Cuba, but that's not likely a career-making kind of move, right? And I wasn't particularly passionate about finance and accounting. I wasn't going to be the partner at any accounting firm.
It was a good intersection of all this stuff, right?
It was incredible. Yeah. It was incredible. And so I very much fell in love with it. And we were able to grow it. I think when I stepped in, we had about 60 members. When I left, we had 80, 90 members. So we were able to grow it over a couple of years and continues to grow. It's about 120 now under Rebecca Danta's leadership. She's incredible. Could not have asked for anybody better to step into that role after
shout out to Rebecca.
Love her. She's doing great work. But yeah, man, it was incredible. I think two things kind of came out of that for me. First was I found a different part of Miami that I wasn't particularly exposed to. I had been kind of headfirst in this Cuba thing. I had met a lot of Cuban Americans, older, younger. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of laughter that comes with Cuba. But there's a whole other thing that was happening that I was aware of, right? I was aware of what Knight Foundation was doing. I was aware of what you all were doing at Live Ninja and Waffle Wednesdays, but I wasn't in it, right? I was on the margins of that. And so it's a really great way to just dive in, get into that. And it was also, I think, a time where I started to hone in on this question of what's authentic about Miami, what's authentically happening here, and how do we pull that out? How do we call that out? And so I think the best founders in town, generally speaking, and this is true for most markets, tend to be really quiet and on the margins. They tend to be headfirst in the business. They're not usually tweeting all that much. And so first, I loved the hunt. I loved the hunt of finding amazing founders. And then I loved finding people who were authentic, both investors and entrepreneurs who were authentic about their craft, authentic about what they wanted. And that was exciting to me, right? It was exciting because I felt like I had an opportunity to build a different Miami, a new Miami, or a new facet to Miami, at least, a Miami that was genuine, that was substantive, a Miami that was grounded in a really different kind of art and craft than maybe what historically we've been known for.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And assisting those founders that are trying to make a difference and provide impact, right? And you talked about authentic leadership. I want to dive into that a little bit, right? Miami is a city that a lot of people on the outskirts don't view as authentic. You know, we're roughly this very new city, a little bit hedonistic, maybe a lot hedonistic in a lot of ways. How do you find authentic leadership in a town that's like that, right? It's like almost like, all this glitz, all this glamour, a lot of smoke signals. How do you find the authentic leadership? How do you pull that out?
I think of I believe it was the Gandhi quote that says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then you win kind of thing.
Yep.
In many cases, I think a lot of folks, when folks are talking about venture and startups in Miami, were like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And then they started saying, this will never work. This is a hobby. This is, haha, you're wasting your time.
Yep.
And then I think something switched. I think authentic, genuine, awesome entrepreneurs found success. Manny Medina found success.
Yep.
Right. And that was one example. Maurice Ferrer and company found success at Mako.
Yep.
That was another win. And then more contemporary, like, you found success, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we started to ratchet up and rack up some wins that helped Miami believe that this was actually possible here, right? I think that brings out, that's kind of that flywheel effect. It brings out more authentic leaders. And so it brings out the folks that say, oh, I didn't realize that this community was here. Yep. I have this kind of analogy. I have a 3-year-old at home, Lucas, and he's starting to get into Disney movies. And so I'm thinking of like Timon and meerkats and like how they dig tunnels all the time.
Yep.
And then periodically they pop up and like serve the landscape. I think of founders in a similar way. Right?
It's a good analogy.
They're constantly digging a tunnel. They're constantly working head down, burrowing on getting things done. And every once in a while, they pop up and say, what's up?
Right.
In Miami, it kind of feels like whack-a-mole. It feels like they're not popping up symmetrically.
Right.
And so the discovery of peers, can founders find other founders, doesn't happen authentic founders finding other authentic founders, authentic leaders finding authentic leaders, doesn't happen maybe at the same level or the same kind of rate or pace that it might in a market with more volume.
Right.
And so I was just freaking hellbent, man. I still am hellbent on getting awesome people together.
Yep.
Right. Coffee, drinks, dinner, whatever.
Yep.
But that awesome folks in this city find their community, find their tribe, find their squad,
Yep.
find attachment to place, right? I think
Yep.
ultimately what's going to keep great people in the city, it's not the weather, it's not the taxes, it won't even be the skyscrapers or the culture, it's going to be people.
Yes.
That's what I think ties folks to a city. It's who you know, who you play with, who you work with, who you hang out with, who your kids go to school with, all the above. And so if we could build community, whether it was at Miami Angels or now at Knight Foundation, of amazing folks who are building great companies, great ventures, great projects, that felt like a really worthwhile and wise investment in the future success of the city.
I love that. So a lot of the stuff that you just talked about, finding your tribe and finding, people that you can connect with and building that sense of community, ties into a lot of stuff that we're doing with the Local Leaders Collective, which I'd like to talk about that in a little bit. But first I want to, get back to your journey. You were at Miami Angels from 2016 to 2018.
Pretty short stint.
Yeah, but impactful stint. And then off to the Knight Foundation, right? Opportunity came. Matt was running for Congress, right? Yeah. Transitioned out. And how did the opportunity for Knight Foundation come your way?
Everyone can blame Juan Martinez, who's our CFO. I did something called Miami Fellows at the Miami Foundation. It was like a leadership program. I highly recommend it. If you haven't done it, the applications will be opening up soon. MiamiFoundation.org, and you can see the Miami Fellows application there. I fell in love with my hometown all over again because of Miami Fellows. In Miami Fellows, you get partnered with a mentor. And it's usually somebody in your field. So the lawyer got an attorney, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here I am at Roots of Hope. I'm doing this program, and they're like, we have this Cuban-American kid who's doing this nonprofit thing. That's not really like a thing. Yeah. That's not a career track. Who do we match him up with? And then after some soul searching, I think Charisse Grant, who's a SVP there, said, I got someone. Juan Martinez, Cuban-American, at a foundation in Miami, and he's a CPA. Perfect. And so I think I was the last fellow in my class to get matched with a mentor. But Juan and I, Juan is salt of the earth, good people, quickly became friends, and we kept in touch after the program ended. And then one day at lunch, I was letting him know, I was like, hey, man, I'm hitting 2 years at Miami Angels, and it's going well. Going really well. I actually think that in a year or so, I might have enough kind of a track record here to pull together a small fund, and maybe we do a sidecar with Miami Angels, or maybe it's its own thing. But I'm seeing it. I'm seeing kind of the LPs come into focus. I'm seeing the thesis. I'm seeing kind of the opportunity where we'd source and how we'd. And I was really excited. Right, here I come. We're gonna do a fund.
Yeah.
And Juan, in not so many words, basically said that's cute. And he wasn't pejorative. He wasn't denigrating about it. He was very nurturing and father-like about it. And then he said, "Have you thought about the Knight Foundation role?" And I initially, got to be honest, I said, "I don't think so, man. I don't know if that's kind of where I'm going to go next. I'm used to the capital markets. I'm used to kind of the private markets and the tempo of the private markets. I'm not sure philanthropy necessarily. I had left the nonprofit world intentionally seeking the private market. I don't know if I want to kind of route back that way. And after putting together a somewhat just like, hey, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not sure. Juan said, great. I'll tell Alberto Barguin that you're interested. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's to always say yes to Alberto Barguin when he invites you to something. Yep. And I had an incredible conversation with Alberto about what the foundation aspired to be, what it aspired to do in the city, how it was going about it, how it was thinking about its work. I had obviously known Matt from before through Miami Angels and Roots of Hope. He had been a friend and a supporter in both of those endeavors multiple times over. But I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if this was what I was being called to do. And so you're kind of going through this discernment process. I had just had a kid. And so you're trying to discern your will. In my case, I'm trying to discern my will versus God's will versus kind of my family and my wife's will. Sure. And so you have all these things that are kind of pulling at you. Yep. And what ultimately I think for me was the kind of the thing, the straw that broke the camel's back in the best of ways, or the tipping point. Yep. Was his realization after speaking with Alberto and Sam and Juan and a few others that first of all, the role is incredible. It's an amazing role, right? Like it's a role that, especially for someone at this point in their career, and it's have so much ability to influence and inform what's happening in community. It's absolutely incredible and a huge honor. But after kind of getting over that whole thing, I realized, you know what, I really think, and I believed in my core, that Miami's at a tipping point, that there's folks like Will Weinrob and 1,000 other people in the city, the Rebecca Dantas of the world, right, that are in this city building a new Miami. They're building a very different Miami than what we're used to. And I framed it in the way that I framed it for Roots of Hope, and I framed it at Miami Angels. Can we bring amazing partners together? Can we bring amazing entrepreneurs, amazing social entrepreneurs, amazing community builders with awesome capital? Can we be risk capital for people and teams who have ideas, they're well-informed, they might iterate 1,000 times over, like any company, any startup would. Same thing with a social transformation project. But you know what, man? That team is exceptional. We're backing the team, we're backing the people, we're de-risking those investments, we're incentivizing all that kind of stuff. And that's what, for me, I was like, you know what? I really, at my core, believe Miami is at this tipping point. We're in this adolescence where we're coming into our own. And it was this notion of, you know what, man? Like, there's times where you seek things out, and for people who like me who are massively type A and have many plans upon plans upon plans, sometimes you have to say no. There's actually somebody calling you to do something very different that you didn't have in your plan whatsoever, but the opportunity is there, right? There's massive opportunity there. And I'm incredibly grateful to folks like Alberto and Sam and Juan for helping, for A, thinking of me, and B, inviting me to consider this, but for also helping in that discernment process, right? In really helping me realize there's massive opportunity here. Might not be in your plans, but it's there for the taking.
That's awesome. And I have to say, I think you're doing an absolutely incredible job.
I appreciate that, man. I really do. That means a lot to me.
Dude, you're crushing it. Absolutely.
That means a lot to me.
Matt, everybody loved Matt, big shoes to fill for whoever followed,
Massive shoes to fill.
Yeah, in Matt's footsteps. And I think you've done an amazing job kind of carving your own path, and your intentions are so great. And every time I sit down with you, man, my respect for you grows.
I
because,
appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
Likewise.
Yeah. I think you lead with that pure intention, and you have a love for this community in this city.
I appreciate that, man. One of the biggest kind of considerations, like Matt had founded this program.
Yeah.
Right. He's in many ways the founding CEO.
Absolutely.
Of this program.
Absolutely. It wouldn't have existed without Matt, especially this laser-like focus into helping the technology and entrepreneur scene here.
Yeah. And this wasn't something that most foundations in the country are doing.
Right.
It wasn't something that was obvious to Miami.
Right.
And he absolutely led the way and created the space. And there are questions about, like, when you're stepping in, succeeding kind of the founding CEO of something, of like, man, like, am I going to honor their vision and their legacy and their work? How can I carry that forward? How can I help build on that in a way that is authentic to you, right? And well-intentioned. But yeah, Matt is and we're also really different people, right? Massively different people in personalities, right? Ultimately. And so there's considerations around, man, like how can I be the best version of me in this role while still kind of helping folks who have expectations, who have an experience with the Knight Foundation thus far. And so there was kind of reacquainting that had to happen amongst all parties. Because yeah, you're young, I have massive imposter syndrome, massive.
Everybody does.
I'm like,
everybody
what
does.
am I doing
to
here?
be self-aware about that is
Totally.
a big deal, though. But everybody has that,
Totally.
I think, yeah.
And I had been just in awe of what my predecessor had done.
Yep.
And you're like, not to put it crassly, but you're like, I really hope I don't screw this up.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. No, everybody feels that way stepping into a role, especially when someone has built something as great as what Matt has built. And while you say that you and Matt are very different, and there's a lot of common threads between you and him.
Yeah.
The care about this community and the willingness and the stomach to make big bets on people doing audacious things and push the community forward.
Absolutely.
So, dude, I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
So what are some of the initiatives and bets that you've made at the Knight Foundation in your role when you stepped in that you're really passionate and excited about?
Yeah. So we took some time, took about 8 months to just do a lot of listening.
Right.
And I definitely had like ideas and biases, and that's really dangerous to have ideas in this role, right?
Sure.
But I definitely had some experiences and biases that informed that I intentionally wanted to put to the side and say, you know what, these are Raul's kind of impressions.
More like a thesis,
yeah,
right?
This is what I think, and my experience thus far in Miami's kind of startup community has been. But let's put that to the side for a second. Go to the source. And so I'm a huge believer in the Boulder thesis, Brad Feld, startup communities. I think to kind of quote Orwell and Animal Farm.
Got his book right there. Venture
There you
Deals.
go, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Shout out to Brad.
Love Brad. Good person. So to pull from Animal Farm and Orwell, everyone's equal.
Yep.
But founders are more equal than everybody else, especially in being the heart and soul and center and leadership of a startup community.
Has to be founder led.
Has to be.
Yep.
If it's going to be sustainable and regenerative, and there's going to be a reinvestment in community, in that specific startup community, it has to be founder led, right? And so we went to the source. It's fairly easy these days to get an email, to get a meeting with a lot of folks with the Knight Foundation email. Surprise. But it was hard to get in touch with founders. A, because they're busy, and B, if you didn't know the Knight Foundation, I think a lot of times I got responses of like, dude, I haven't had my exit yet. I'm not doing, are you raising money from me?
Right,
like,
right.
I don't,
circle back in 2 years.
Come back in 2 to 5, right? And I was like, no, like, I'm not trying to raise money from you.
Yeah.
I really just want 30 minutes to hear out what's been your journey, what's been your experience building amazing companies. And doing that kind of, I think what in the last few years, we've seen companies like Fairlogics and eBuilder have exits, 500 million, 400 million respectively, or maybe the inverse of that. And when those exits happened, a lot of folks in the formal startup community said, oh, I had no idea that company was here. And so part of the kind of exciting thing was that hunt that I was used to at the Angel Group was to say, how big is the funnel? Like, how big is the funnel, and who's here and who's building what? And let's get straight from the horse's mouth what that experience has been like. Yep. And so one of the things that kept coming up and time again was that founders did not feel particularly attached to one another. They did not feel like they had a space or spaces, community ultimately, that was of, by, and for them, without the photo ops, without the ribbon cutting, without the kind of more public element of entrepreneurship. Really important stuff. We want to change the psyche. We want to change the vision. We want to change the direction that this city perceives itself going into, right? It's part of the social transformation that we seek. We want Miami to believe that this is possible. I think I've said this before, and I give Matt tremendous credit for doing that, because Matt's investments while at Knight Foundation allowed Miami to believe that this was possible. Yep. Really, truly, actually possible. When we sat down with founders, they said, we're excited about it. We believe it too, but we don't know who with necessarily, right? Like, who exactly are we doing this with? Are there peers who are also in the trenches, other meerkats, if you will, digging, that understand what we're up to? And so whether it's putting together a forum-like thing with LLC, which you're leading phenomenally, or working with people like Alex Nucci on craftspeople.org, if you want to check it out, which is for founders, by founders, but technical kind of workshops, tactical workshops on how to get the nitty-gritty done. We really wanted to make sure that we were aligned with market reality and aligned with market needs. And in this case, the first thing that was evident was founders want more spaces that are led by them, that are for them, somewhat in a really curated fashion, and that are tactical in nature, less inspiration capital and more technical, hard expertise on how to get things done.
Yeah, practical stuff, blocking and tackling.
Exactly. Right. Stuff that's not really sexy in any way, shape, or form, but critical to the success of a venture. Right. And so we started just kind of doing a lot of listening and a lot of then saying, all right, like, if you're a founder, are there behaviors that you're already engaging in that we can maybe institutionalize or formalize? Alex was flying out to California once every 45 days for what he called a tune-up, where he would meet with like the VP of growth of Twilio and the VP of this, of that, right? And it really, he had actually really just practical questions. I'm like, hey, I'm at this point in my company, I need to get from A to Z. Can you help me through your experience understand what that roadmap might look like, what that path might look like? And he was doing that because that expertise generally isn't as available in Miami as it is in a place like the Valley. And so the question was like, we're not trying to change Alex's behavior, right? We're not trying to change a founder's behavior per se, but we are trying to say, Alex, if you're doing that and if you have that need, I'm pretty sure other founders have that need also. Can we formalize that? Can we institutionalize that behavior? And then give that space to founders. So our capital is being used to kind of kickstart founder-led communities.
I love that.
Right? That very quickly those grants have a very short half-life. Within 18 months, those things are fairly self-sustaining. Right. Right. If founders don't find value in that within 18 months, right, it didn't meet their expectation. It wasn't good product market fit. Right. We shouldn't subsidize it forever. And so we're doing a lot of that, man. I think those are the kinds of investments that we're really, really, really excited about. Things that are of, by, and for founders, because it's at the grassroots, right? It's at ground level.
For sure. And the founders know what they need more so than anybody else, right?
That's exactly it, right? Like, you know your company, you know your need, you know your community and your context better than anybody else could.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of, I think of this in terms of hard and soft infrastructure. The hard infrastructure are things like 500 startups, accelerators, incubators, groups like Endeavor that mentor, right? Companies that are up and coming. Miami Angels, capital markets are hard infrastructure. You need hard infrastructure. I think it's analogous like the water and sewer system or the electrical grid of a city. You need water and sewer, and you need an electrical grid if you're going to have a city. But what really brings life to a city is kind of the green space, the public space. It's the art and culture. It's a sense of community. It's the coffee shop on the corner, right? I think that's a soft infrastructure. And in the startup community, that soft infrastructure is culture, is how attached are founders to one another. How easy is it for a newcomer to plug in?
Yep.
If somebody was born, raised in Miami, went away for school, and then built their career over 10 years in the Valley or New York, and they want to come back home with their young family, how easy is it for that person to find opportunity, to find their tribe? That's the soft infrastructure, the culture of a place, of a startup community that we're really now starting to hone in on. I think we've got some really great hard infrastructure in place, some really great foundational kind of anchors and organizations and institutions that are holding this down and do a great job of that. And now we're really examining, all right, how do we make sure that there's life being breathed into that, and that life is being led by founders.
Yeah, and I think it's key when you're founder led. I think it's really important because founders have empathy for the challenges that other founders are going through. They know exactly what they could offer or what they need at a particular moment because they've been through the challenges. Anybody else making a hypothesis or a theory on what is good for the community is really just a guess. Right. But oftentimes founders like, I lived through this, or I am currently living through this, and this is what we need right now in this moment. Right.
That's exactly it, man.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about kind of what we're doing with the LLC is that I think not only you're a fixture of the community, but you also bring tremendous credibility to this because you've been there, right? Because you've built a company, you know the high highs and the low lows.
Absolutely.
In a way that a lot of other folks don't, right? If you ask kind of like my grandparents, like what careers. First of all, my grandparents think it's kind of ridiculous that I'm in philanthropy. They're like, we don't know what you do. And second, if you ask my grandparents, like, what careers are acceptable for their grandkids? It's like the classic ones that most immigrants would want, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? You go down the list, right? Entrepreneur, maybe is on the list, but it's like on the B list.
Right.
And like, especially tech entrepreneurs, like, it's like, oh, you're building an app? Right? It's like, no, there's a lot more to it, right? So just even in your own family, you might not have folks that understand what you're doing, right? I think there's also this thing that's super real, like, and I feel it in my life, in my marriage, very much so. You want to be a reassuring partner. Everything is good. Everything's gonna be okay. We can take measured, calculated risks. The risks that I'm taking are a lot different than the risks that a founder takes. And so there's things about your company that you might not tell your spouse. Right. But that you can tell another founder, because they'll get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need that authentic connection, and you need, especially for me, when I was running Live Ninja, I really didn't have a safe space that I can go to with these problems because you have to wear some sort of a mask when you're in public or when you're running your company. You're running a very, rocky, road as far as like what you're doing every single day. Every day is up and down. It's a roller coaster ride of emotions. You can't show that to your employees or to your investors, right? You just can't. You have to show them that, you're the leader of the company and that you're steering the ship the right way and you have confidence in the way you're steering it. But we all know, no matter how solid of a founder you are, how experienced or seasoned you are, you'll go through those ups and downs and you have to deal with it internally. To have a safe space where you can go with those things and let that out, I think is super critical. And I think a lot of the challenges are bigger in our heads than we make them out to be, just naturally. Talking about it with other people that have gone through similar challenges, that could share experience about how they overcame that, all of a sudden the clouds part and things are very clear.
Entirely.
Right?
I bow down to you because when you were leading Live Ninja, that was when we had started as a city and a foundation to invest in this space of entrepreneurship and startups and tech startups in some ways. And when folks said, well, like, what's in Miami? Live Ninja became the reference point, right? And so in many ways, I feel like there was this undue or unfair pressure on you all as like the banner carrying kind of the standard bearers of Miami tech and Miami startups, which is an additional burden, right? Not only are you building a company and got kids and employees and investors, but then you have this whole community, this whole ecosystem that's looking at you as the example of what's possible.
Yeah.
And so I think that first class and maybe even that second cohort of founders in Miami, they took one for the team in ways that other folks are don't understand or are benefiting from, because again, they were the folks that helped change the psyche, the companies that helped Miami believe this was possible, right? Because you were doing it, others folks said, all right, like, cool, this is real.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. That means a lot to hear. And again, Live Ninja, I think it was a special time in my life for sure. And I think, again, one of the reasons that I believe now looking back on it, that Live Ninja was very impactful, it wasn't because we set the world on fire with a $1 billion exit. It didn't happen that way. You know, in baseball terms, you know, we got on base, we didn't strike out. It happened. We did the best we could. We hired a lot of good people. But I think really what, you know, set Live Ninja apart was our doors were always open, and it was led by a lot of the people that were born and raised here in Miami that really gave a shit about the community. And I think we were doing just okay enough. The company was scaling. We were moving like up and to the right on certain metrics, that while we were going up and to the right, even though it wasn't a rocket ship, while we're going up and to the right, we opened our doors the entire time. And we were very welcoming, and we really cared about what was happening around us, and we wanted to pay it forward as much as we could. Even though we didn't have a ton to pay forward, we wanted to pay whatever we had forward. And when I look back on it, I think that's what set Live Ninja apart. Not just the founding team, me, Emilio, and Alfonso, who are all Miami guys, but just you go down the list of all the people that worked there, whether it was Carolina or Jared or Miles or anyone, they all really cared about this ecosystem, this community, and always had time to meet with someone to help them, you know, be connected.
Amen, man. And that to me, when I think of the Boulder thesis, that's it. Yeah. Right? That's it in practice. We need founders to lead the way on this. We need founders to open up the doors. Dude, I remember I was at Roots of Hope and I came to pitch at one of the Live Ninjas, and it was somewhat weird. I was like, here I am, this Cuban American pitching in this like tech crowd, and I was like, what am I doing here? But the sentiment, first of all, the first sentiment, I was like, shit, these waffles are delicious. That's certainly the first sentiment.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit ticked. I was like, I want to get a quarter waffle. It's so good.
But there was unlimited. You could go, you re-up whenever you want.
I caught on quick, don't worry. I got my good fill of waffles. And the second thing was like, oh wait, like this is a really welcoming space. There's nothing here for us to probably do together, but it was welcoming nonetheless. Right. And that I thought was that's the ethos of what this is and should be.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Miami, again, we're very prideful about our city. If Miami was a person, how old would it be? Like, what do you see Miami as right now? Are we a kid? Are we a teenager? Are we just going through college? Like,
no, I think as a city, we're a young place, 120 years old, but really only in the last 70-ish years have we taken off. Right. Started to get things together.
Right.
I think we've just started to hit adolescence. I think we're in adolescence. TBD how long that takes.
Right.
But very much in an adolescence, in that like a lot of growth spurts. There's still a lot of cranes in the air. There's no other American city at all, not even close, that has built 4 museums, a science museum, a cultural museum. We've built so much and invested so much in arts and culture in Miami over the last 15 years. Nobody else comes close to that. And so there's been growth in terms of commercial and residential buildings. There's also been growth on the fabric, the cultural fabric, the institutions that support and invest in the cultural fabric of the city. And so when I think of Miami today, I think Miami very much still leads with elements of beach and fun and tourism. That's, I think, we have to lean into. That's a natural asset that we want to completely dominate. Absolutely. And might be hurting a bit right now because of the virus. But we've also said to the world, there's other parts to Miami. Miami has a unique, distinctive arts and culture scene. That's not just Basel in December, right? And that increasingly is going from a consumer, right, of art to a producer and exporter of art. And I think that's where the Knight program. So Knight invests in 3 key areas. The first being journalism, which is where the Knight brothers, who owned Knight Publications and Knight Ritter, they had 26 newspapers in the country. So it's the ethos of where we come from is central to our identity. So journalism. We invest in the 26 cities where they once had a paper, and we invest in the arts because we believe that in the arts you'll find vehicles and avenues and ways to create community and attach people to place, to help bridge communities, to help foster understanding and a sense of humanity and a sense of commonality amongst us. Yep. And so the arts are really important, to the point where we've done about $165 million in Miami's art and culture scene over the last 15 years alone. And I think what's interesting about that and our entrepreneurship strategy in Miami is that in both cases, we are trying to position Miami as a place where ideas are born and ideas are exported. And not just local, provincial, regionally relevant ideas, but globally relevant ideas. And so in our startup program, in our entrepreneurship program, we're looking for founders who are building globally relevant product and building teams of global scale and global relevance and creating jobs that pay well and create wealth that is distributed amongst a lot of folks into a lot of hands here in the city. In our arts program, we're doing something similar. I think we've invested a lot in the consumption of art, where Miami is now consuming world-class art year-round, not just in December. And you're going to see a transition, I think, in the city, where Miami is beginning to also produce world-class art year-round in all its modalities. And so I think that's if there's a throughput or a commonality amongst what we're looking to do as a foundation, the first and foremost in our mission is to promote informed and engaged communities. We can do it through the arts. We can do it through entrepreneurship. But if you kind of drill down a little bit further into how we're doing it, it really is this question of Miami becoming a place that moves in ideas. We're already known for moving in people and goods, some legal, some illegal. But are we known for moving in ideas? Are we part of the global flow of knowledge, whether it be in the arts and culture scene or it be in the startup entrepreneurial tech venture scene? And I think in both cases, Miami in this adolescence is figuring out what it wants to be, right? We're not trying to be the Valley. I'll say that again. We are not trying to be California or San Francisco or the Bay Area, not trying to be New York. We're trying to be a much better version of our city, of Miami. It'll have its idiosyncrasies, which give it its charms. It'll have its quirks. It'll have its frustrations. But we will be a city where more Miamians can say, I can build an amazing company here, right? And that'll make us a better place.
If you could call out some founders or just members of the community in general, folks that you're, essentially looking for in, ideas or just in general things that you might be interested in funding for the Knight Foundation, somebody that might be listening to this and be like, I want to make an impact in the community, right? If you were to speak to those people, like what kind of ideas and things are you looking to fund? How could you also motivate people for taking a step forward and saying, you know what, I want to get involved in the community. I want to help. Like, what would you say to those people and how could you call some people out?
Hit me up.
Yeah.
Raul@kf.org.
Okay.
I think we're looking, first of all, for authentic and sincere leadership and sincere ambition.
Authenticity is key.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
I think we're looking for folks who are aligned in that love for Miami, right? The foundation is headquartered here.
Yep.
We love this place.
Yep.
We are of this community. This isn't a community that we invest in because it feels good or it's conceptually good. No, this is our community, right?
Yep.
And so we're looking for folks who share that value, those values, those passions about, convictions about the city, right? They're authentic in that conviction. I think we're looking for also folks that are really kind of grounded in market reality, grounded in what social change looks like. The foundation is very much an investor, right? We're social investors, and we measure ROI in terms of social transformation, social change. And
are you open to all ideas as long as there's a common thread of social change and impact and entrepreneurship?
I think we're open to anything and everything, especially open to kind of the critical feedback. It's really easy, 33 floors up in a kind of granite-clad tower, to become insular and give me a whiteboard and I can give you 1,000 plans, right?
Right.
It's not a particularly healthy thing. It's really, really important that we be in community. It's really important that we constantly have meetings and coffees and discussions and great dinner conversations with folks that say, this is going really well, kudos, and this isn't going so well. And I'm surprised you made that move, or why haven't you considered that, right? And sometimes that kind of critical feedback is a little bit more delicate. Folks are more deferential to the foundation. But I think we really welcome it, right? It's essential actually to the work we do. We want to know what's happening. It may or may not change our approach, but just having it will make us better investors. It'll make us a better foundation, having a fuller picture of what community thinks and feels about what's happening and how we're approaching opportunity. So folks, as folks listen in and they think about this, there are some things that we do kind of prioritize as it relates to strategy. 3 things in particular right now that we're really excited about and heavily exploring. The first is what we've kind of spoken about already, which is communities that are of, by, and for founders. It doesn't have to be shiny. Doesn't have to be public in terms of it being kind of a big event. Spaces that really speak to, in the long term, what the aspirations and priorities are of the entrepreneurs that are here. And so I think Craftspeople.org is a really great example to check out. The LLC is a great example of that as well. These are spaces that are being led by founders, for founders, with founders, right? That kind of space creates attachment to place. It creates bond. It creates community. That's really interesting for us. Alison Lubarsky has a really great initiative underway called Just Dinner. Yep. You can check that out. You can go to startup.miami, and there's a Just Dinner tab there. It's the welcome committee, if you will, right? When folks come to the city, or as folks kind of come back, or for the first time, or they're coming up through the ranks, when they want to find their tribe, how do we do that, right?
Yep.
So community building that's of, by, and for practitioners, right? Really great people. That's something that's of interest to us. And again, sometimes it is really kind of a big event that does that. The 10,000 person kind of gathering that is that jolt you need once a year to kind of say, oh, wow, this really is global in nature, and takes you out of your kind of local myopia. And then sometimes you want the smaller things that happen more consistently once a month, like LLC's forums. So that's one, man. The second thing we're always, that we are heavily looking into is this question of capital activation. How do you get more of Miami's wealth invested into the asset class? How do you make it more accessible? There's a ton of private offices, family offices here. Brickell is a testament to that. The challenge with a lot of those family offices is that the front door says Corporation Inc. It's like the most generic thing ever.
Right.
It doesn't say we invest in early stage SaaS companies. No. Or we invest in CPG, or we invest in food and beverage. It just says Corporation Inc. Right? As vanilla as it comes. And so they're not, the funding in the city, the capital in the city is not organized in a way that it is known and accessible to most folks. It's known and accessible if you have certain social capital or networks, or you went to school with certain people. It's not widely accessible, right? That's a reality of the city. We're really interested in models that activate that capital, educate and inform that capital around the asset class, and also make it known and accessible to more people, right? It's absolutely kind of, when we think of equity, right, in the work, that is absolutely central. If this is a sport of a few folks who have a lot, and continues to be a sport of a few folks who have a lot, and it's not accessible to more of Miami, then I'm not sure that we're doing this well enough. I'm not sure that that's actually going to get us the Miami we want. And so for me, this question of activating capital really is also a question of equity. Can we make it easier for more people to access the wealth that's here to fund their ideas? So I'm a 1,000% believer that talent is universally distributed, but access to opportunity, access to capital is not. And so that's a big priority for us right now, activating more capital in Miami. Third area, which is we're just kind of beginning to explore, is this question of talent. Specifically, how does a great talent and great opportunity find each other? That might look like reimagining maybe the career service or career center at a university, which conceptually hasn't changed since the GI Bill was introduced. That's a marketplace that may or may not work. Or something like Talent Scout Miami. You can go to talentscout.miami, which is an aggregator, right? It's aggregating a lot of resumes from folks and pushing them out to companies in town, to a lot of different things. But how is that talent and opportunity come together? And is there an opportunity for the Knight Foundation to help with that?
Super important.
Yeah. So those are three things. You can find it on our website. You can kf.org/Miami. There's a few kind of strategy documents and blog posts. And
does that list all of the investments you've made there?
It lists, you'll see all our investments there. You'll also see a couple of blog posts that spell out kind of the approach we're taking. We're always asking two questions. What are we doing, and how are we convinced? Like, how do we know that this is working? Why do we know that this is the right thing to do right now? And the other question is, why should we still do this? Is there something where we're going to higher ROIs, or something else we should be doing that supplants the current strategy or even the current space? At some point, Knight Foundation will almost certainly not invest in startups and in Miami's entrepreneurial ecosystem. There is an exit here, right? The exit play is that this is a self-sustaining, regenerative ecosystem.
Right. You're not in the business of just funding things indefinitely. You want to see a path to sustainability on every initiative you fund.
And in the market as a whole, right? In the ecosystem as a whole. And so when we think of kind of the bigger play, what do we think will get us there? Right? What do we think will get us to the point where our capital isn't needed to either incentivize or de-risk certain investments, where there is a core group of founders, as there were in Boulder, who are the leaders. I'd love to get to a point when I sit down with an elected official, be it municipal or regional, or when I sit down with an economic development partner that works in the area, and when I ask, who do you think that startup ecosystem leaders are, when they give me names of founders, I'd be thrilled, and I'd think that my time at Knight Foundation was massively successful if they gave me names instead of organizations. We need startup and entrepreneurial support organizations. That's key and critical. But we also need founders to step up. We need founders, especially those that have exited in the past couple of years, to step in, right? To step into the ring, whether that's as angel investors, whether that's as mentors. There's a lot of things that can be done there. But let's make sure that there's a recycling and a reinvestment of the capital. And that's fiscal capital, financial capital, but also kind of experience capital.
Absolutely.
I think that's where we're trying to get to.
Well, brother, every time I sit down with you, I'm always inspired. Love talking about the community and the things you're doing. If somebody wants to hit you up and find more info, where can they go?
Yeah, they can either call Knight Foundation, and they can easily get my number online, or Raul@kf.org. Easy way to get in touch with me also.
Awesome. There you have it. And we'll drop all that info in the description of the podcast. Raul, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for the invitation, man. Enjoyed it.
Of course.